Welcome to another episode of Commercial Property Roadshow. Today we're actually going to see a property. We're going to see the inside. It's going to go from a Thai restaurant to a burger joint. It's here in Waterloo in Sydney. And let's just see how it's going to go. We've got our property manager here with us. We've got one of our other colleagues that works with us in the buyer's agency space. We've got our due diligence guy here. We really want to see how are we going to transform this. And we're actually helping one of the clients who didn't even buy the property from us to see how we can make this a better property for them, and how we can manage it and create a better asset for it. And she bought it for probably mid ones, so 1.5, 1.6. Look, the current rent on it, when she bought it, the rent was a bit higher. Now, with the new rent coming in, it's probably going to do a little bit above 5% yield. But at the end of the day, it's about not only your starting point, but how are you going to massage that through the next 5 years? How are you going to manage it, increase the value of that asset to, potentially, to get it to, increasing 10, 20% over the time you manage it and the time you own it, right? Especially when you're in somewhere in Sydney and Waterloo. So let's go and have a look. All right, so we're doing a property inspection of a vacant property, hey? With our property manager here. Hi, say
Hi guys, how are you?
All right. Ooh, look, there's a Chinese restaurant next door. And let's see how the tenant has left it. Hello, Michael. It's always good to inspect a property once the tenant has vacated to see how much make good they've done or none at all. Right. It's not a bad fit out. Remember when it comes in, it's concrete floor, concrete wall, so this would have been put in by the tenant. This would have been a fridge. This is there's the construction there, which obviously would inhibit some business. But we can feel the range hood. One of the things you do notice is that they've stripped out the commercial kitchen, which means that any commercial kitchen is going to cost about 100 grand to put in. So this is actually, when you go in for a tenant, that actually looks like the bare bones of this, and there's not the same incentive as if it was fully already fitted out. But the range hood is working. That range hood is probably 20, 30,000, sometimes even 40, 50. Cool room, storage, and this goes out to the exit. I'm guessing it goes to a parking and someone else's restaurant next door, but there's probably a toilet here somewhere and parking. So I'm just going to make sure it comes back in. Whoa, that is the entrance. There's probably some stuff to go there, probably some tables. There's probably some alfresco dining as part of it, but that's really it. So yeah, and so this is going to be transformed from a Yes Thai to a burger bar. So let's look, in conception it works really well with what they have, basic wise, but there's some limitations to this in that, there's an air conditioning unit, that's good. This will need to be changed. There's next door to a fresh grocer, which is great. Got a Chinese restaurant, which is great depending on how well they trade. It's obviously a precinct full of food, because one of the big things is you've got to look at what's local to you. Precinct full of food, which is great. And so grooming, it's got lots of new residents, which is great. Beauty, more food, very wide professional services. Obviously what they're doing to the facade now here is going to be a bit of an issue for some of the incoming tenants. It will have to, it's normally in the access, or when they're not here, you'll get the exposure. With them here, you have a little less exposure. But generally, this is an area where there's a lot of residents and they want to eat local, right? Go downstairs and eat. So there is no burger bars around, lots of Asian around. And I think that cafes with the lifestyle, it probably will do well, It's just a matter of being able to have access and having that exposure, being able to be seen. Any good commercial property, like any commercial property really, the whole idea is that it needs to be seen. Your tenant has to have exposure, especially when it comes to food, right? A place to advertise, a local captured market that they can actually capitalize on, and they have to be brilliant at what they do. They have to have really good food, really good track record to be really able to prove yourself. In this day and age, you're seeing that we're seeing food come back into the market after COVID. We see a lot more people want to do takeouts, see a lot more people who are willing to are not cooking and doing takeouts, want to eat local and support local, which has been really good. But it's all about them having to define the market. The market's still got a long way to go, and there's still going to be COVID incentives and leases for food. There's still going to be a lot of tenants that are nervous, but it's good to see that tenants are willing to sign 3 to 5 year leases. But in order to fit that property out, it's probably a 50 grand process to be able to change everything, just put chairs and everything in there as well. But it's got the basic bare bones, and hopefully we'll, I can do an updated video of how that's going to transform. Okay, so we've done a bit of a look around inside. So Greg here, I'm just going to ask him a few questions. So there's a new tenant coming in here. We didn't lease the property, but there's a new tenant, and when a swap over of tenant, and as you can see what it looks like inside, well, what do you typically do next?
So
right?
This is a brand new tenant coming in. The property was previously fitted out. So what you want to do is that a lot of the times with a new property, there can be fit out that was left by a previous tenant, which is in this case the example. So Helen will flick over the camera and show you in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But what you've got to establish is that fit out actually has value. So in the lease, we've got to ascertain, which we haven't done the lease, but it's got to be identified, is that fit out the owners, or is that now going to be the tenants, and whose responsibility is it to maintain? So it's not an empty shell. There's light fittings, there's a kitchen, there's grease traps, there's a whole lot of things. And as a property manager, these are the things, and as an owner, these are the things that you want to be aware of, because down the track, if something goes wrong, somebody will say something like, the cool room, is that your responsibility as an owner, or is it the tenant's responsibility? And those are the types of things that need to be drawn up in the lease, so that there is no dispute on who's responsible and whose responsibility lies where.
Yeah, well, that's really important. So, so once the tenant's in, you guys are going to come back and have another look.
Correct. So once the tenant's in, it was a Thai shop. Once the tenant's in, they did a beautiful fit out. Now that the new guys will go in, they're going to actually use that fit out, and we're going to say to the tenant that it's their responsibility to actually maintain, because they derive and benefit from that.
And of course they're going to add new things to it, because there isn't there wasn't a kitchen in there, so they're probably going to add a kitchen. Then we're going to define what's part of that, and of course that gets defined later on, when they leave, or if something happens in the lease process.
Correct.
Yeah?
And don't forget, unlike residential, you don't really do a condition report in commercial, because you say to them, we're not going to interfere in your business, and we're not responsible for the running of the business. Unlike residential, where as an owner you're responsible for the outgoings, with commercial we give them the property and they're responsible for everything, the floor, the doors, the windows, the air, etc., etc. So that you don't do a condition report to say, oh well, the floor looked like this. We instead give them the property and say, run it as you see fit, and make sure you just give it back to us as defined in the lease. And how they get it and how they give it back may be two totally different things, because it's all defined in the lease.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes this is actually of value. Like for example, this property is of value with it fit out already in there. And once the other tenant comes in, if they add other things to it, it might increase that value, and it's better for it to be kept there.
Yeah. And one last thing to add. So when this was bought, it could have been bought as an empty shell, meaning just a concrete slab, not even a roof, nothing like that. And the previous tenants gone in and maybe they spent $20, $30, $40, $50,000 and put in an extractor fans, put in a grease trap. Now that actually is value that the new owner has derived, and can actually use that to try induce incoming tenants, saying, look, I've got a property with a grease trap, I've got an extractor fan, rather than having the previous tenant remove all of that and bring it to an empty shell.
Yeah, especially for startups or new businesses, it saves them a heaps of money when they have already a fit out in there. So that's where the incentive is. With businesses that are, your McDonald's and your KFCs and your branded ones, they prefer empty shells. But with someone who is like, your regular Thai, burger, Chinese, Korean, all of those food stores, or even cafes to an extent, having a fit out really saves your small business operator a lot of money, and they can put that into the outgoings and the stock, and really give them a kickstart forward.
Because as an owner, a lot of times those businesses might not have the funds to actually install that kind of fit out. It can run into that 40, 50 and more. So, it's coming from somewhere. Either it's coming from a fit out contribution to the owner, or a rent free, or something to the lower rent. So as an owner, if you don't have to give that, all the better.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's keep going.
Great.